He looked at her faded uniform and decided she was zero. To billionaire Silas Vane, the woman refilling his glass wasn't a human being. She was a target for his boredom. He thought that by using a dead, aristocratic dialect to insult her, he'd prove he was the king of the room. He was dead wrong. He didn't realize the woman standing before him wasn't just a servant. She was a scholar in exile, and the few words she was about to whisper would not only silence the room, but bankrupt his entire empire by morning. This is the story of what happens when a bully picks a fight with a genius who has nothing left to lose. Before we move further, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. The silver fork felt heavy in Camille Vance's hand. She turned it slowly under the dim kitchen light, inspecting the tines for water spots. Her fingers ached, the kind of deep, bone-tired ache that comes from working 2 shifts back-to-back at 58 years old. Around her, the kitchen staff of Le Prestige in downtown Dallas moved like a machine. Chefs barked orders. Dishwashers slammed metal against metal. But Camille worked in silence. She had learned long ago that silence was safer than conversation. Silence didn't reveal too much. Julian, the floor manager, appeared behind her like a shadow. He was 32, dressed in a tailored suit that cost more than Camille's monthly rent. He looked at her with the kind of expression people reserve for expired milk. "Camille, you're moving slower than usual tonight," Julian said, tapping his watch. "We have VIPs coming in. I need you sharp, not shuffling around like you're in a nursing home." Camille didn't look up. She kept polishing the fork. "I'm fine, Julian. Just finishing prep. Fine isn't good enough. Table 6 is being reserved. High-profile guest. Do not embarrass this establishment." He walked away before she could respond. Camille set the fork down and closed her eyes for just a moment. She thought about a different life. A life that felt like it belonged to someone else now. 10 years ago, Camille wasn't polishing silverware in Texas. She was standing in a lecture hall at the Sorbonne in Paris, receiving the Geneva Fellowship, the most prestigious linguistic grant in Europe. She had written a groundbreaking thesis on the evolution of African diasporic language patterns in post-colonial Europe. Scholars twice her age had stood to applaud her. She was brilliant. She was respected. She was free. Then the phone call came. Her younger brother, Marcus, had collapsed on a construction site back in Dallas. A stroke at 43. The medical bills came next, followed by predatory lenders who convinced Marcus to take out a second mortgage on their family home. When he couldn't work anymore, they foreclosed. Camille flew back to Texas, drained her savings to fight the legal battle, and lost. She traded the library for the tray, the Sorbonne for the service industry. She became invisible. Now, she lived in a 1-bedroom apartment with Marcus, who still couldn't speak clearly and needed round-the-clock care. Every dollar she made went to his medication, his physical therapy, his dignity. Camille opened her locker and pulled out a small, leather-bound book. It was a rare edition of linguistic theory, the only piece of her old life she couldn't bring herself to sell. She ran her fingers over the cover, then tucked it back inside. Julian's voice echoed from the dining room. "Camille, table 6. Now." The energy in Le Prestige shifted the moment Silas Vane walked through the door. It wasn't just that he was rich. Dallas had plenty of rich men. It was the way he moved, like he owned the oxygen in the room. Silas was 40 years old, dressed in a navy suit so perfectly tailored it looked like it had been sewn onto his body. His shoes gleamed. His watch, a limited edition Patek Philippe, caught the light with every movement. He didn't walk to his table. He performed. Behind him trailed a young woman in a red dress. She looked uncomfortable, her arms wrapped around herself like she was trying to disappear. Silas didn't hold the door for her. He didn't wait to see if she was keeping up. She was an accessory, nothing more. Camille watched from the service station as the host, a nervous young man named Kevin, led them to table 6, the best table in the house. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Dallas skyline. Silas sat down and immediately snapped his fingers at Kevin. Water, sparkling, and make sure it's cold this time. Last week, it was room temperature. Unacceptable. Kevin stammered an apology and rushed away. Camille took a breath and approached the table, carrying 2 menus. Good evening. My name is Camille, and I'll be taking care of you tonight. Silas didn't look at her. He was scrolling through his phone, his face bathed in blue light. His date, the woman in red, offered Camille a small, apologetic smile. Thank you, she whispered. Camille nodded and placed the menus down. She turned to leave, but Silas's voice stopped her. Wait. Camille turned back. Silas finally looked up. His eyes moved from her face down to her feet. He stared at her shoes. They were black, non-slip, and scuffed from years of wear. She had bought them at a discount store in South Dallas because they were all she could afford. Silas's lip curled. You know, he said loudly, loud enough for the neighboring tables to hear, I've always believed you can tell the quality of a restaurant by the quality of its staff. And judging by those shoes, I'd say we're in a Denny's, not a 5-star establishment. The woman in red flinched. Camille felt heat rise in her chest, but she kept her face calm. I apologize if my appearance is unsatisfactory, sir. I assure you, the service will meet your expectations. Silas laughed. It was a cruel, performative sound. Service? Let's see. Can you even read what's on this menu? Or should I just point at pictures? Camille's fingers tightened around her notepad. She didn't respond. Silas leaned back in his chair, clearly enjoying himself. Oh, and one more thing. I'm in town to finalize the liquidation of the old Preston archive downtown. You know, all those dusty old books nobody cares about. I'm turning it into luxury condos. Finally putting that space to good use. Camille's heart stopped. The Preston archive. Her family had curated that collection for 3 generations. Her grandfather had built it. Marcus had worked there before his stroke. It was the last piece of their legacy, and this man was going to erase it. Silas smiled, sensing her reaction. Wait, he said, his voice dripping with mockery. I want to see if you can even read what's on this menu. Silas Vane leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. His date shifted uncomfortably in her seat, but he didn't notice. He was too focused on Camille, his eyes glittering with malice. You know what? Silas said, his voice rising just enough to draw attention from nearby tables. I'm tired of dumbing things down. Let's see if the help here has any real class. He glanced at his date and smirked. Watch this. She'll think I'm asking for ketchup. Then, without warning, Silas switched languages. But it wasn't French or Spanish. It was something older, sharper. He spoke in rapid, guttural bursts of 17th century High Dutch, a dialect once used exclusively by European banking elites to keep their secrets. It was the language of old money, designed to exclude anyone who hadn't been born into privilege. Silas's words were deliberate, venomous. He called Camille a relic, a genetic waste of space, a woman too stupid to understand she was being mocked to her face. He told her that people like her were the reason society was declining, that she should be grateful to serve someone of his stature. He ended with a flourish, a phrase that translated roughly to, now, fetch me something worth eating, assuming you understand a single word I just said. The restaurant went quiet. A few diners looked over, curious. The woman in red covered her face with her hand, mortified. Silas sat back, crossing his arms, waiting for the confusion, waiting for Camille to stammer, to ask him to repeat himself in English, to prove that she was exactly what he thought she was. But Camille didn't move. She stood perfectly still, her notepad in hand, her expression unreadable. Inside, her mind was racing. She knew that dialect. She had spent 2 years studying it during her doctoral research. She had written an entire chapter on how 17th century Dutch merchant families used linguistic exclusion as a tool of social control. She knew every conjugation, every archaic verb form, every subtle insult embedded in the grammar. And she knew something else. Silas had just made 3 grammatical errors. He had used the wrong verb tense. He had mispronounced a key vowel. And worst of all, he had used a phrase that didn't mean what he thought it meant. He had tried to call her inferior, but what he had actually said in the formal structure of the language was that he himself lacked proper lineage. Camille looked at him, really looked at him. She saw a man who had bought his way into rooms he didn't belong in. A man who used language as a weapon because he had nothing else. A man who thought a suit and a watch could hide the fact that he was afraid. And in that moment, Camille made a choice. She wasn't going to let him win. She took one step closer to the table. Her voice, when she spoke, was calm, steady, cold as winter stone. She didn't walk away. She leaned in, her eyes locking onto his, and the room held its breath. Camille didn't blink. She didn't flinch. She simply stood there, a woman in scuffed shoes and a faded uniform, and opened her mouth. When she spoke, it wasn't in English. It was in flawless, aristocratic High Dutch, the kind spoken in royal courts 3 centuries ago. Her pronunciation was perfect, every vowel crisp, every consonation precise. She corrected Silas's grammar first, her tone polite but devastating. She explained, in the same archaic dialect he had tried to wield against her, that his verb conjugation was incorrect and that his attempt to insult her lineage had, in fact, insulted his own. She told him, with the calm authority of a professor addressing a failing student, that if he intended to use the language of the elite, he should at least learn to speak it properly. The restaurant went silent. Not the polite silence of people pretending not to listen. The stunned, breathless silence of people watching something impossible unfold. Silas's face turned red. His jaw went slack. He stared at Camille like she had just pulled a knife out of thin air. His date's eyes went wide. She looked at Camille with something close to awe. Camille wasn't finished. She switched seamlessly into English, her voice never rising, never shaking. "The wine you ordered, sir, is a 2007 Bordeaux. It's a complex vintage, known for its layered tannins and notes of dark cherry. It requires a refined palate to appreciate. Given your earlier comments, I'd be happy to recommend something simpler, perhaps a sweet Riesling, something more suited to your tastes." Someone at a nearby table gasped. Another person pulled out their phone and started recording. Silas's hand trembled as he gripped the edge of the table. "Who do you think you are?" he hissed. "I'm the woman you underestimated," Camille said simply. She just used her mind to fight a giant. Most people would have stayed silent and lost their dignity. Subscribe so you never miss the moment the underdog bites back. Silas opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. He had been dismantled in front of an audience, and he knew it. His entire performance, his whole identity as the smartest, most powerful man in the room, had just been shattered by a waitress. But Silas Vane didn't get where he was by accepting defeat. He was a man who destroyed competitors for sport. And if he couldn't win with words, he would win another way. He reached into his jacket pocket, his fingers brushing against the cold metal of his watch. His eyes narrowed. A plan formed in his mind. A vicious, calculated plan. If he couldn't humiliate her, he would ruin her. Camille turned to walk away, her head held high. But Silas's voice cut through the room like a blade. "Wait." Camille stopped. "I want everyone here to know something," Silas said, his voice rising. "I just realized my watch is missing. My Patek Philippe. It was right here on the table 5 minutes ago." He stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "And the only person who's been near this table is her." The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Every eye in the restaurant turned to Camille. Silas pointed at her, his finger shaking with manufactured outrage. "She took it. I know she did. I left it on the table when I went to adjust my cufflinks, and now it's gone. That watch is worth $80,000. Camille felt the floor shift beneath her. This wasn't real. This couldn't be happening. "Sir, I didn't touch your watch," she said, her voice steady despite the panic clawing at her chest. "Of course you'd say that," Silas sneered. "You probably saw an opportunity and took it. Look at you. Look at those shoes. You need the money, don't you?" The woman in red stood up, her face pale. "Silas, stop. You're being crazy. She didn't take anything." "Stay out of this," Silas snapped. He pulled out his phone. "I'm calling the police. This is theft. Grand larceny. She's going to jail." Julian, the manager, appeared at the table, his face slick with sweat. He looked at Camille, then at Silas, weighing his options in real time. Money won. "Camille," Julian said quietly, "just empty your pockets. If you didn't take it, you have nothing to worry about." "I'm not emptying my pockets," Camille said. "I didn't steal anything." "Then you're refusing to cooperate?" Julian's voice hardened. "Sir, I'll call the authorities immediately. We take theft very seriously here." Camille's mind raced. If the police came, if they arrested her, she'd lose her job. She'd lose the apartment. Marcus would lose his care. A theft charge would follow her forever. She'd never work again. And Silas knew it. He was smiling now, a cold, satisfied smile. This was his nuclear option. If he couldn't beat her intellectually, he'd destroy her life. If this story has your heart racing, comment, "I'm still watching." Let's see who's truly following this journey of justice. Camille thought about the security cameras. Le Prestige had installed a new system 6 months ago. High-definition cameras covering every table. If she could just get Julian to check the footage, it would prove her innocence. "Julian," Camille said, "check the cameras. They'll show I never touched his table." Julian hesitated. He looked at Silas. "Actually," Julian said slowly, "the cameras in the VIP section have been disabled for privacy reasons. We don't record our high-profile guests." Camille's stomach dropped. Of course. Privacy for the rich. No protection for the staff. Silas's smile widened. "Looks like it's your word against mine. And let's be honest, whose word do you think the police will believe? A billionaire or a waitress?" Outside, the wail of sirens cut through the night. Someone had already called the police. Silas leaned in close, so close Camille could smell his cologne. He whispered, just loud enough for her to hear, "Say goodbye to your life, waitress." The 2 police officers pushed through the front door of Le Prestige, their uniforms crisp, their expressions neutral. They had responded to a call about a theft. High-value item, $80,000, the kind of number that made them take things seriously. Camille stood near table 6, her hands at her sides, her face a mask of calm. Inside, She was screaming, but she had learned long ago that panic didn't help. Dignity was all she had left. "Officers," Julian said, rushing forward, his voice high and nervous. "Thank you for coming so quickly. This woman, Camille Vance, has been accused of stealing a very expensive watch from our guest, Mr. Silas Vane." One of the officers, a tall man with gray at his temples, looked at Camille. "Ma'am, we're going to need you to come with us." Camille nodded slowly. "I understand, but I didn't take anything." "That's what they all say," Silas muttered from his seat. The officer turned to him. "Sir, we'll handle this. Please step back." But before anyone could move, a voice cut through the room. It was deep, calm, and carried the kind of authority that made everyone freeze. "That will not be necessary, officer." Every head turned. From the corner booth, the one tucked in shadow near the wine cellar, an elderly man stood up. He was in his late 60s, wearing a simple wool sweater and slacks. He didn't look like much, but the way he moved, the way he carried himself, suggested otherwise. This was a man who didn't need a suit to command a room. The officers recognized him immediately. Their posture straightened. "Mr. Sterling," the gray-haired officer said, his tone shifting to something close to reverence. Silas frowned. "Who the hell is this? Some random old guy trying to play hero." The man, Arthur Sterling, walked slowly toward the center of the dining room. He didn't rush. He didn't need to. "Mr. Vane," Arthur said, his voice quiet but cutting, "you should be very careful about who you call random." Silas laughed, but it sounded forced. "I don't care who you are, Grandpa. This is between me and the thief. Stay out of it." Arthur stopped a few feet away from Silas. He looked at him with the kind of expression a professor might give a student who just failed an open book exam. "I am Arthur Sterling, chairman of Sterling Global Financial, the bank that currently holds 70% of your hedge fund's leveraged debt." The color drained from Silas's face. Arthur Sterling wasn't just rich. He was old money, real power, the kind of man who could make a phone call and erase someone from the financial map. Silas thought he was the biggest fish in the pond, but he forgot that whales swim in the deep. Subscribe now, or you might miss the moment the shark finally gets eaten. Silas stammered. "Mr. Sterling, I had no idea you were here. This is just a misunderstanding. I was just trying to destroy an innocent woman's life to soothe your wounded ego." Arthur finished. Silas opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Arthur turned to the officers. "Before you search her, gentlemen, perhaps you should ask Mr. Vane why he keeps patting his left jacket pocket so nervously." Every eye in the room turned to Silas. His hand, which had been subtly touching his chest, froze mid-motion. "I don't know what you're talking about," Silas said, his voice cracking. "Then you won't mind turning out that pocket," Arthur said calmly. The officer stepped forward. "Sir, if you could please show us the contents of your jacket." Silas's face turned a deep, bruised red. His eyes darted around the room, looking for an escape, a way out. But there was none. The officer stood in front of him, patient but firm. "Sir, the pocket." "This is ridiculous," Silas spat. "You're going to take the word of some old man over mine? I'm the victim here." Arthur didn't move. He simply watched, his expression unreadable. The woman in the red dress, Silas's date, stood up. Her voice was quiet but steady. "Silas, just show them the pocket. If you didn't take it, you have nothing to hide. Isn't that what you said to her?" Silas glared at her, but the walls were closing in. Every phone in the restaurant was out now, recording. This wasn't just a private humiliation anymore. This was going viral. With a trembling hand, Silas reached into his left interior jacket pocket. He pulled out a handkerchief first, tossing it onto the table. Then his fingers brushed against something hard. Cold. Metal. He froze. The officer leaned in. "Sir, what's in your hand?" Silas slowly pulled out the Patek Philippe watch. The $80,000 timepiece gleamed under the restaurant lights. The room exploded. Gasps. Shouts. Someone yelled, "Oh my God, he set her up." The officer took the watch from Silas's hand, examining it. "This the missing item, sir?" Silas's mouth opened and closed like a fish drowning in air. This is a social experiment. I was testing the staff. I wanted to see if they were honest. It was a test." The woman in red grabbed her purse. She looked at Silas with a mix of disgust and pity. "A test? You were going to let them arrest her. You were going to ruin her life for a test." She turned to Camille. "I'm so sorry. I should have said something sooner. I should have stopped him." She walked out of the restaurant, her heels clicking against the marble floor. She didn't look back. Arthur Sterling reached into his own pocket and pulled out his phone. He tapped the screen, then turned around for everyone to see. "I've been recording this entire evening," Arthur said. "Every word Mr. Vane spoke. Every insult. Every lie. I thought it might come in handy." The crowd murmured. The officer looked at Silas with something close to contempt. "Sir, filing a false police report is a crime. So is attempted theft by deception." Silas's hand shook. "You don't understand. I am Silas Vane. I run a billion-dollar fund. You can't treat me like some common criminal." Arthur smiled. It was a cold, thin smile. "Actually, Mr. Vane, about that fund. I've been doing some research while I sat in my corner. That bespoke suit you're wearing? It's a rental. I recognize the stitching. I own the company that made it." Silas's eyes went wide. Arthur continued, his voice calm and devastating. "You rent your suits. You lease your cars. Your penthouse? Mortgage to the ceiling. You're not a billionaire. You're a man drowning in debt, pretending to be something you're not." Arthur pulled out his phone again. He dialed a number. The room went silent. "Hello, this is Arthur Sterling. Connect me to the Zurich board." "Yes, I'll wait." He looked at Silas. "We are calling into Vane leverage. All of it. By sunrise." Silas's phone buzzed. Then it buzzed again and again. The sound cut through the stunned silence of the restaurant like a siren. He pulled out his pocket, his hands shaking so badly he almost dropped it. The screen lit up with alerts. Notifications. Messages. His credit lines were being frozen. His trading accounts were being suspended. His partnership agreements were being reviewed for breach of morality clauses. It was happening in real time. His empire, built on leverage and lies, was collapsing like a house of cards. "No, Silas whispered, scrolling frantically. No, no, no. You can't do this. You can't just destroy me." Arthur Sterling pocketed his phone. "I'm not destroying you, Mr. Vane. You destroyed yourself. I'm simply removing the scaffolding you've been hiding behind." Julian, the manager, appeared at Camille's side. His face was pale, his hands wringing together. "Camille, I want to apologize. I should have trusted you. I should have checked the cameras. I should have." Camille looked at him. She didn't say a word. She simply turned and walked away, leaving Julian standing there, small and ashamed. The officers approached Silas. "Sir, we're going to need you to come down to the station and answer some questions about the false report." Silas looked around the room. Every face was turned toward him. Every phone was recording. His date was gone. His reputation was in ruins. His money was vanishing by the second. He had walked into this restaurant as a king. He was leaving as nothing. He stumbled toward the door, the officers flanking him. As he passed Camille, he stopped. he said, his voice broken. "You did this." Camille met his eyes. "No, Mr. Vane. You did this. I just refused to let you get away with it." Silas was escorted out into the night. The crowd watched through the windows as he was placed in the back of a police car, not in handcuffs, but in shame. The kind of shame that doesn't wash off. He lost everything because he couldn't show a basic human being respect. If you believe your character is your true currency, comment amen below. Inside the restaurant, Arthur Sterling approached Camille. She was standing by the service station, her hands still trembling slightly. "Dr. Vance," Arthur said gently. Camille looked up, surprised. "How do you know my name?" "I was the primary donor to the linguistics department at the Sorbonne," Arthur said. "I read your thesis, the one on diasporic language evolution. It was brilliant. I tried to find you after you left, but you disappeared." Camille's eyes filled with tears. "I had to come home. My brother—" "I know," Arthur said, "and that's why I've been looking for you. I have a proposition." He handed her a business card. "How soon can you have your bags packed for Washington, D.C.?" 6 months later, Camille Vance stood in the grand atrium of the Smithsonian Institution in Washington, D.C. Sunlight poured through the massive glass dome above, casting patterns across the marble floor. She was wearing a tailored blazer, new shoes that didn't hurt, and a name badge that read, Dr. Camille Vance, Director of Linguistic Preservation. A young assistant approached, holding a stack of documents. "Dr. Vance, the translation team is ready for your review. Also, there's a package for you at the front desk." "Thank you, Rebecca," Camille said, her voice warm. She walked through the halls of the institution, passing researchers and scholars who nodded respectfully as she went by. She had an office now, a real office with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a desk made of oak, and a window overlooking the National Mall. On her first day, Arthur Sterling had walked her through the building. He had explained that the Smithsonian was launching a new initiative to preserve endangered languages and document oral histories before they were lost forever. They needed someone with Camille's expertise, someone who understood that language wasn't just words. It was culture, it was memory, it was survival. The salary was more than Camille had made in 2 years of waitressing. The benefits included full medical coverage, not just for her, but for her family. Arthur had smiled when he handed her the contract. "There's one more thing," he had said. He slid a second document across the desk. It was a loan forgiveness letter. The predatory loan that had stolen her family's home, the debt that had crushed her brother, was gone. Paid in full. "Consider it a signing bonus," Arthur had said. Camille had cried then, not the quiet, hidden tears she had shed in restaurant kitchens, but full, heaving sobs of relief. Now, 6 months later, she stood in her office and opened the package that had arrived. Inside was a framed photograph. It was the Preston Archive in Dallas, the one Silas Vane had tried to liquidate. Attached was a note from Arthur. "The archive has been officially preserved under the Smithsonian's protection. It will be renamed the Vance Family Collection in honor of your grandfather's work. Congratulations, Dr. Vance. You saved it." Camille set the frame on her desk. She looked at it for a long moment, then checked her watch. She had somewhere to be. She grabbed her coat and headed for the door. Rebecca called after her. "Dr. Vance, don't forget, the committee meeting is at 3. "I'll be back in time," Camille said. "I have an appointment I can't miss." She drove north, out of the city, toward a facility in Westchester, a high-end medical suite. A doctor met her at the entrance. "He's ready to see you now," the doctor said, smiling. "And he has a surprise." Camille walked down the hallway of the medical suite, her heart pounding. The walls were painted a soft cream color, and sunlight streamed through skylights above. This place was nothing like the state facility where Marcus had been before. This was a place that believed in healing, not just maintenance. She pushed open the door to his room. Marcus was sitting in a wheelchair by the window, looking out at the gardens. He was wearing a clean flannel shirt, his hair neatly combed. He looked healthy, strong. When he heard the door, he turned. His face lit up. Camille walked over and knelt beside him, taking his hand. "Hey, big brother," she said softly. "How are you feeling?" Marcus smiled. His mouth worked for a moment, the muscles straining. He had been doing intensive speech therapy for months. The doctors had said there was progress, but Camille hadn't wanted to hope too much. Hope had hurt her before, but then Marcus took a breath, and he spoke. "Camille." The word was rough, slow, but it was clear. It was her name. Camille's eyes filled with tears. "You said it. You said my name." Marcus squeezed her hand. He took another breath, concentrating hard. "Proud," he said. "So proud." Camille collapsed against him, wrapping her arms around his shoulders, crying into his chest. He held her with his good arm, his hand patting her back gently. They stayed like that for a long time. When Camille finally pulled back, she wiped her eyes and laughed. "I'm sorry. I'm a mess." Marcus shook his head. He pointed to her shoes. New ones. Then to her blazer. Then to her face, which no longer carried the exhaustion of double shifts and unpaid bills. "You good?" he said slowly. "You safe?" "We're both safe now," Camille said. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, the years of exhaustion, the humiliation, the moment in that restaurant when she had to choose between silence and self-respect. She had chosen herself, and because of that choice, everything had changed. Knowledge is the only sword that doesn't rust, and kindness is the only shield that never breaks. She saved her brother and her dignity. Most people would have given up, but you're not most people. You're here because you value the truth. Subscribe so we can keep bringing these lessons to life together. Camille spent the rest of the afternoon with Marcus, talking to him, reading to him, watching him form words with increasing confidence. When it was time to leave, she kissed his forehead. "I'll be back on Sunday," she said, "and I'm bringing you something special. Your favorite pie." Marcus grinned. "Apple." "That's right. Apple pie." As Camille drove back to the city, she passed a small office building on the outskirts of Dallas. She didn't notice it, but if she had looked closer, she would have seen Silas Vane inside, sitting at a desk, filing paperwork. He was working as a junior analyst now, rebuilding from nothing, learning for the first time in his life what ambition really meant.
Hey there. Thank you so much for watching till the very end. We really appreciate your support. If you enjoyed this story, please don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment below. We'd love to hear your thoughts. And guess what? The story doesn't end here. Click on the video right here on your screen to dive into another fascinating story. Trust me, you don't want to miss it. Once again, thanks for being a part of this amazing community. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring stories that move you.